So we're going to start with just an introduction, as I said, 3 minutes for each of you to introduce yourself and talk about your qualifications. So with that, I'm going to start with Bill Connors.
My name is Bill Connors. I live at 8016 Lakeview Street. I'm married with 3 triplet daughters. I'm an accountant and operate my own small business, giving accounting, bookkeeping, and financial advisory services to small business clients. I'm running because I've been out here for, let me start over. I've been out here for 20 years, and I've been here since incorporation. And when we incorporated, we thought we were getting small local government. And our surveys show that our primary priorities are to keep the government small, keep our taxes low, limit large developments, and basically keep a lid on the local businesses. Along with that, we have a responsibility to maintain our roads and also to regulate the building that goes on in the village. Unfortunately, I think somewhere along the way we've gotten off track with that, and for the last 3 years, I've been wanting to work on that and make positive change for the village. What I find is that our opponents have failed to lead on Volente Peak, on BCRUA, on building reg reform that we all agree needs to be accomplished. And they've also failed over the years to control commercial and marina expansion. And now we find that they're accusing us of being open to that and making statements that we're going to sell the village out to Travis County. None of this is true. So that's why I'm running. That's why I'm here today.
Thank you, Bill. So just please. We'll just move through. Make your own notes in your mind. So with that, Andy, I'm going to allow you to.
Okay. My name is Andy Fogarasi. I've been a resident in Volente for about 17 years. Been coming out here since the early 90s, so well before incorporation. My background includes an engineering degree from Texas A&M University, actually industrial distribution, which is process, how to do things most efficiently, quickly, and in a good way to make money with the least amount of money spent. Also have my MBA from the University of Texas. And I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life, working for some big companies, and not as an entrepreneur, but starting several companies on my own, one of which was reasonably successful. It's allowed me to retire a little bit early, assuming I can handle my finances well. My reason for being involved in the community, I still want to be doing things. I like accomplishing things, and doing things in Volente is important to me. I want to respect the beautiful little village that I moved out to 17 years ago, and enjoy driving home over the hills and feeling a place of peace without, for instance, a green hall or lots of development out here, just the community that we came to. And I feel like I can really help do that, especially with the process and putting things in place to make sure that we develop, do things properly, but also put our ordinances together in a way that uses community input, legal and engineering expertise to make sure that we get what the people want, that keeps our community looking like it was, feeling like it was when we moved here. That's it.
Thank you, Andy. With that, Chris?
All right. I'm obviously the eye candy here. I am, so, but I'm Chris Wilder. I've been out here in Volente for just about 12 years now. Been married for 23 years. We lived in Austin. We've been in Austin for about 23 years now. I have 2 boys, 17 and 13, and I am the chairman and CEO of a company called Tega Energy Services. We actually are in the process of finalizing the sale of that company right now. But I also am a chief technology officer for a company out in McLean, Virginia. It's a private security contracting firm. I lead their cybersecurity, cyber terrorism, and cyber warfare practice. And so this is a company that is all veterans and patriots, mostly special operations guys and CIA. And we work very closely with veterans and helping the veteran community to really understand, be able to extend after they're done serving, to be able to extend that into other areas. So we've done a lot of work in Houston and Puerto Rico, because of these different hurricanes. We send guys down there. But I also write for Forbes, and I do a lot of really cool stuff. And most people, I never get a chance to talk about what I do because I most of the time just can't tell you. So it's really kind of a special thing for me today. So I was on city council for 5 years. One of the things I talk about, the reason why I spent a little bit of time talking about my other role is that I really try to push to my kids and talk to my kids a lot about there is no higher calling than service. And whether it's service on city council or service to your country or to whatever, these are the things that are important to me. And I really try to push that with my kids. My kids are like, "Oh my God, Dad, why are you doing this? You're insane!" And because it was brutal last time I ran, or last time I was on council, and I was recruited, and you're very persuasive, by the way, and so are you, and all of you are very persuasive. I talked to Bill and talked to Sean, and our values and our commitment, we're all aligned. We're aligned in the fact that we want to have a transparent government. We want to feel confident that your tax dollars are being, and mine especially too, are being used effectively and for the right reasons. We want to be, when you walk into the office, to not look like it's a problem rather than, hey, we want to help you come to a solution. So we're looking at friendly government, trying to get the values of the reason why I love living out here. And I think we can just do better. I mean, they're not bad people, they're just wrong. And so, I believe that this is kind of what we're doing. Oh, and by the way, I also own 2 Irish pubs, and I don't work at them, but so if you ever need a good Guinness, we're good. Yes, you can.
Robert, could you turn the sound on the speaker up?
It's not behaving.
Oh, it's not behaving.
Not behaving.
Okay, so we'll just
Yeah.
please ask everybody to speak as loud as you can, please. Okay, with that, Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, it's Steve Baker. I have a pretty good background, I think, for serving on council. I started my career as a CPA, business consultant, working for a very large accounting and business consulting firm. After that, I was a chief financial officer for a real estate development company and property management firm. And then after that, about 30 years ago, I founded a business that advised companies in implementing business management systems. I've had that company for 30 years. It's been very successful, twice awarded one of the top 25 fastest growing companies in Austin. We've developed software that does business planning, budgeting type things, operations management that's used by about 25,000 users around the world. I speak at conferences across the country about improving business management and financial operations. And I sold off most of that company, so I've kept a small part of it, so I still do that a little bit. In that role, we had a lot of large service contracts, technical contracts, so I learned a lot about negotiating large, complex contracts, probably over 1,000 different contracts I've negotiated in my role as a CEO of that company. Probably about all to say about that. I have been living in Volente for about 4 years. I've lived in the Lake Travis area for 30 years and owned Lake Travis waterfront property for about 18 years. I'm married to Liz Baker, my wife over here in the corner, and we're raising our 2-year-old grandson over there on West Drive. I've been the mayor pro tem in Volente for 2 years. Prior to that, I was on the Finance and Administration Committee. And since being on council, I've been the chair of the Public Safety Committee and the Finance and Administration Committee. Just in a word, the reason I really want to run, why I would like to be of service to Volente is I don't have any business interests. I don't have any construction plans here in Volente. Really, I just plan to live here for the rest of my life, so I have an interest in this area of, I'd like to preserve it, but I would like to plan very well for what I think is the inevitable growth and development of this area so that we work with people, businesses, new developers coming in a way that benefits our current residents in the way of, roads improvements, public safety, and that sort of thing, but really a focus on making the town better for those of us that are here.
Steve. And then finally, Sean.
Okay, Sean Ryan. I live on Sherman Street. I've lived out here 10 years. I actually purchased my property 13 years ago. Went through the whole process, much of which has been discussed in terms of how difficult it is to get through building rules and all of that that it entails. My professional background, what I do currently is I'm a software solution architect. I oversee very large enterprise implementations for field service software. Our company got acquired by GE in January. And in that role, I have to correct and drive the course of the project to its success so that at the end of it, we have referenceable customers. A lot of times what we do to ensure that type of success is we focus on a concept called a minimum viable product, which means you focus first on the objectives and business outcomes you're trying to get to. You take into consideration both the human and financial resource constraints you have, and then build it around that rather than going off just to implement software and all of its functionality. I believe that type of skill is particularly needed here. As I've sat back and watched and dealt with and listened, I see a real opportunity for some better stewardship of the village and its resources. In terms of setting priorities, not 15 or 20 streams of busy work, but really 3 or 4 focused priorities. Break that down to where it gets into a yearly agenda, and then further break it down 3 to 4, again, focused initiatives that we work on as a village. We're constrained. We have human resources. We're not even 600 people in this village. We've got a lot of great volunteers. We have financial constraints, and we need to manage to those responsibly. And I don't see the process in place that drives the prioritization and then falling out of that, a coherent fiscal policy, which translates to our tax rates, which translates to how we budget, and which translates to, you're not always going to get it perfect or right, but when you're looking after your constraints and focused on your outcomes, you're going to do a lot better. Lastly, I just wanted to mention a little bit on my personal side. When I first moved here in 2007, I joined the volunteer fire department. Sadly, I was only able to spend about 8 months in total because I went through a rather difficult divorce. But I did have a choice to make at that time, either stay on with the volunteer fire department or get primary custody of my son. He's now 17, he lives with me, and I couldn't be prouder of him. So also to Chris's point about service, I think that's hugely important. I get my son involved in those things. Thank you, anyway.
Thank you, Sean.
Ken, real quick.
Yeah.
You know about my mother, so if I get a phone call, I'm going to have to.
Absolutely
step out.
understand.
Yeah.
Chris is dealing with a personal issue within his family, a health issue, and so if he gets a call, he needs to leave, just understand he could leave at any time. So with that, I'd like to move into the actual questions. Again, 2 minutes for each person, each of the 5 people to respond in 2 minutes, and then I'll come back and give every person 1 more minute to just kind of summarize. So the first question I've got has to do with both current environment as well as looking into the future. We are like you have said, a small community of 600 people, 2 square miles on the edge of Lake Travis. And either whether we're looking backwards or we're looking forward, we're always talking about the balance between residential and commercial. And I'd like to know, have each of you just talk to how you see that balance playing out, how it is right now, how you see it playing out in the future, how you would intend to manage that. So with that, I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to let you, Sean, start.
Perfect. I think that's a great question because if you look at the big picture of our village, where we are, we're surrounded by preserve. No matter, you can do the math a couple of different ways. Does the PDD shake out to 300 new homes? Can we limit it to 150, somewhere in between there? However you look at that and you look at the scheme of our 2 miles of village, we're not going to grow to be a couple of thousand people. We can't. We're constrained naturally. So you look at the business structure here is, I believe, best the best approach is neighbor-friendly businesses like we have, like our neighbors here, Adam, Kara, John, and I'm going to mispronounce his wife now, Gayla. Gayla, thanks for that. But it really does come down to a sensible balance of, I think, wanted and needed amenities, like we had when I first moved here. There was a little grocery store. You could pick up a few items. I don't think anybody on this entire council candidate ballot wants to pull anything big or anything unfriendly in the way of business into this village. And it just doesn't make any financial or really geographical sense.
Done? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. With that, Bill.
Okay. I was hoping I have a little more time to prepare, but that's a very broad question, and it covers a lot of topics. I mean, the first thing you need to think about is, does the PDD get developed or not? Does the Volente Peak happen? If that happens, it will justify and increase the ability for businesses to make it out here. And so it's a critical concern, and I hope we get an opportunity to talk in more depth about Volente Peak later in the show here, but let's talk about businesses. 2 years ago when I got on council, primary goal was to revise and overhaul our land use ordinances, and we started with zoning. And the first thing we did was we went in and we went through the very long list of all the things that existed in the zoning ordinance, and we checked off all the businesses that were inappropriate to Volente. For 14 years, our predecessors, our opponents, and their supporters completely ignored all that. What we did put in there was restaurants, local services, and professional offices. 80% of the people in the community survey said they want restaurants. And so we made that possible. They say we want to expand commercial businesses and let it run wild around here, but the reality is that our predecessors and their opponents, when they were in control, did all the primary zoning that made what is commercial today commercial. We could not change that when we overhauled the zoning ordinance. You can't downzone somebody from one category to the next. So we were working with what we had to work with. The other piece we did was we narrowed down the scope on marinas. We had 3 different classifications of business uses. One of them was industrial. Does anybody here want industrial? Where did it come from? Don't know. Don't care, actually. What we did was we focused on marinas. We narrowed the use to a basic marina operation, and then we required conditional use permits for any expansion after that.
Thank you, Bill. With that, Steve.
What I would like to see out here is kind of what we already have, maybe a little more of it. I would like to see what is, I feel, complementary to the existing businesses we have now, and complementary to this being a lakeside rural community. Of course, I think we all agree that restaurants, coffee shops, ice cream parlor, maybe even if we continue to grow that and kind of improve our little central area here, like has already started to happen, that we have something that's more walkable, something that I picture being a little bit more like Wimberley than I do like Green. And what I mean by that is, Wimberley has more like little boutique shops, sandwich shops, art galleries, that sort of thing, as opposed to a Green that maybe has outdoor amplified music, plus those sort of things. So I definitely see that it's a good thing for us to bring businesses in here. Used as an example, city of Bee Caves, they have the lowest tax rate of anywhere in this entire area. It's quite low because they brought in so much retail into their area over there. Those sales taxes really help keep the property taxes down. So I encourage that. I think there's services that can help benefit the local residents too, as far as the services that are being offered. I just, like I said, want them to be complementary to what we have and preserving our character out here.
Thank you, Steve. Andy.
Okay. To begin with, as I mentioned when I was talking about myself in the start, the reason I came out here to Volente and what I understood from visiting VJs and going into the communities was this wonderful little community feel that did not feel like Austin. So that's the vision that came to me and I think has been conveyed throughout the last 17 years as what we want Volente to be like. have a little country store. Maybe we can pick up some milk. It would be nice, and bread, where we don't have to drive to H-E-B and other places. A restaurant where we can come to and have a margarita and share a cheeseburger, maybe hear a little bit of music, but not overly disturb our neighbors. It is going to grow here. There is some space for it to grow out. The PDD is set. There is a contract on the PDD, or however you want to call it, the rules, that was very, very well defined and very well thought out. If that remains in place and there is development that occurs up there, it will follow the formula that was dictated. So what does that leave? That leaves how we move forward individually on our pieces of property and how our neighbors move forward as they develop their property. That's what we really have to watch out for. And I get kind of rather scared when I hear discussions of tossing our ordinances out, which I like, putting them, replacing them with something, but not simply 4 pages of Travis County building ordinances. It's only 4 pages. And to me, from my understanding of Travis County ordinances, whether we enforce them or not, those are the most fundamental core level ordinances that are set up for areas of a county where there is no community, where the cows and the deer outnumber the people, where there's a big landowners and they're not having to have problems between each other. When you get a lot more people in a smaller space, different ordinances, different types of restrictions go into place. Oh, I've already hit the end? Holy cow. Okay, last thing. Zoning isn't a part of Travis County. But
Thank you. And Chris?
Yeah, so ironically, I agree with everybody here. I think we, except for the horse crap about us wanting to, take over, just release our ordinances and use Travis County exclusively. This is the stuff that's been pushed out there by our opponents, talking about that we're just going to turn over Volente to Travis County or whomever, the LCR or whatever crazy demon that's out there in the world. That's not true. Not true at all. We want common sense ordinances. We want to have a way that we can work with businesses, a way that we can come together. Look at what happened with the boat party guys. Once Mayor Beck stepped up and said, hey, we're not going to be able to deal with this, litigiously. We need to actually sit down and talk to people and discuss what we, discuss the issues and then come to some kind of resolution. We as a village, since I've been here, have been incredibly reactive. We talk a lot about vision. We talk a lot about what we're going to do, rah-rah, every year, but we just really have not had the ability to step up, put a stake in the ground, say, what are the 3 to 5 things that we want to do as a village, we want to achieve? And one of those things obviously has to come out of the comprehensive plan. We got to understand what it is, how we want to interact with both businesses. There's also threats that are coming from the outside. And it's threats like the PDD, potentially. So I believe that the first thing we need to do is actually set up and start acting like leaders and step up, put this together, work with the community, get the input, become transparent, and let the community say, we did a survey 11 years ago and we redid it again, and it was, surveys are suspect. So we want to get more input from the community. We want to be able to basically take this forward, be more transparent about, what it is we want to be as a village when we grow up, because I'm not leaving, so we may as well have the right government that can lead.
Thank you. So now is an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal to anything that anybody has said.
Yeah, I'd like to rebut.
I'll start with Sean.
Oh, great. Andy, I just want to point out something. You pointed out the number of pages. I think you said 4 pages in Travis County. I think you pointed out in your communications that came quite late in the process that you've been going through with the site ordinance, the site building development ordinance, and then you say we've gotten it from 300 to 94. It's almost like a container. You take a cup and you put milk in it, and you can say it builds bones and gives you vitamins 8 to 9 ways. But if you put poison in that cup, it's no good. So does it really matter that it's 4 pages if it's the right 4 pages, or if it's 90 pages and it's the wrong 90 pages?
Sean?
Well, I'm just listening.
I'm going to get to you, Andy.
I'm just listening.
Think about it.
And I'm not attacking you, I'm asking.
No, it's cool. Yeah, and I would ask, I want civility to prevail today, up here and with all of you. So I'm counting on you
Was that
for
not
that.
civil?
Absolutely. So with that, then, Steve. 1 minute.
So, if I think I understood what you guys were saying here, is that the plan for the voice is not to get rid of our site development ordinance, or it is to get rid of the site development ordinance and replace with Travis County Chapter 80?
I don't want to get into dialogue, so just
directing
make
as
your
the
point.
Be
Yeah,
happy to answer it in my turn.
when you get your turn. Yep.
Okay. Well, from reading your website, I kind of conclude
Whose website?
the Voice of Volente website.
Sean.
Okay.
From reading that, I came away with the conclusion, and I won't go into a bunch of detail, that that's what the plan was, is to get rid of our site development ordinance. I asked our new city attorney what he thought about that, and he said that he'd never heard of any of the 125 municipalities he's worked with in Texas ever doing that, and that he thought it was a bad idea even for a very small town. So I think, boy, we all agree on an awful lot, and that may be the biggest thing that I think we don't really agree on, because I know it was Bill back at in 2015 when you did try to repeal our site development ordinance, and I just thought that was maybe your current goal, and sorry if I'm wrong.
Okay.
So setting the record straight, I did not try to repeal the ordinance. I tried to carve out the section that applied to building houses. Building a house is building a house. And the codes are fairly common. Everybody talks about building it to code. Well, what are we talking about? Fundamentally International Residential Building Code. Very simple, very straightforward. My proposal is to carve that piece out of the larger site development ordinance, which is also aimed at large subdivisions and commercial construction, and leave that stuff till second, but focus squarely on getting this straight. I've traveled this village for 2.5 months, 3 months now, talking to people, and I've heard horror story after horror story of people struggling to build under these codes. We all agree that building regulations need to be changed. And it's a high priority for the village. And my colleague here, Andy, has spent 2 years on it. He was assigned it, and I checked in the minutes in December of 2015, we agreed to start working on it.
Bill?
2 years ago.
Thank you. With
Where
that,
is it?
Andy?
Just for clarification, the council voted for me to start my committee in about March of this year. Before that, we agreed not to diversify or spread our resources out on different ordinances in different areas. We were focused solely on zoning, and we needed to get that done. That's when I had the approval from council to create my committee, which I immediately did. Carrie Witt and others joined me. As for 4 pages versus 200 or 300 or whatever, boy, Sean, I can't agree with you more. I truly can't. But I have to get some sort of number out there to the community to share where we're at and what we're looking at, and a metric that says, here's what we've done so far. And that was my effort in putting up those numbers. The content and how I got there and the process I got there started 2 years ago on my own, and spending lots of time on it, even without council's strict guidances to create a committee. And you'll see things even in 2006 where I put a resolution into place and we voted into place on how we go about adopting ordinances was put in there by me as a part of this process.
Thank you, Andy. Chris?
I'm
Chris.
good. I'm good.
Can I
You're
take
good.
this minute? Because I'd like to
No,
respond.
that's it.
Well, I'm saying
I've
check the minutes from 2015,
Bill,
January
please.
2016,
Please,
February
please,
2016.
respond afterward.
It's in the minutes.
Yeah.
Just leave it.
Okay.
Okay, the next question I've got for each of you to talk about is one that we've wrestled with here in the village over and over again. And it has to do with, we've created a good suite of ordinances, but ordinances only really work if they are followed. And the issue of enforcement of ordinances, how best to enforce our ordinances, or how best to craft ordinances that are enforceable with a low-cost solution of some sort. So I'm going to start, that's your question. You're each going to get 2 minutes for that. And hang on just 1 sec. There we go. Okay, I'm going to start right now with Steve.
All right. I believe in a complaint-driven process, somewhat close to what we've been following, yet it quite be informally. So I took on the job of documenting what our complaint process is, and have revised the administrative ordinance to reflect what I think we should do. We are getting very close to, I believe, passing that. And basically, I believe that the people of Volente want to do the right thing when they know what the right thing is. And so if a letter is written by the mayor or by our city secretary and says, hey, are you aware that this particular regulation exists, that person normally responds. I checked on our history of that sort of thing, and in the history of the village that we had records for, of all the complaints that have been registered, all but one complaint in the history of the village was resolved amicably without having to go through and escalate it to any sort of enforcement level. So I think it's a good idea to have it be neighbors talking to neighbors. If that doesn't work, then go to City Hall, register a complaint, and then have an escalation process from there where we're just educating the person about what they need to do. I believe that will work much better than having somebody drive around and spying on people and, as they say, a little car with yellow lights on the top like we've had before. I think that is probably a pretty bad idea for our small little community.
Okay, thank you, Steve. With that, Andy?
Okay. First of all, there's two pieces to this enforcement rule. The first part is the ordinances themselves. They have to be simple. They have to be easy. Boy, I love minimal viable product, MVP concept. It just has to be the simplest thing that our minimum staff can enforce. If it's clear, it's concise, then we have a lot less problems with people breaking the rules if they understand them. It also becomes a problem when our ordinances are convoluted and our city admin people have to start reading the ordinances and trying to apply them when they're inconsistent or confusing. That just opens up another can of worms. They just have to be concise, precise, clear, simple, that we're able to enforce. Now, the enforcement part, part two. I'm kind of leaning more towards a complaint-driven process. I'm not sure if I like it personally, but I think that is the right thing and more people in Volente want it. But most importantly, we need somebody outside of the community, some agency that we contract with, to actually do the enforcement. It never works well when somebody inside of our community, a neighbor, is coming to us and trying to force us to tell us what to do. It needs to be an impartial, outside, third party in those hopefully extremely rare occasions that we actually have to use it.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
Okay, I'm going to actually agree with the first part of Andy's theme. I think you look at the root underlying cause, which is the state of the ordinances as they exist right now. It's like you got to answer that. You got to simplify it. You've got to make it fair and equitable and balanced before you even look at enforcement. And I'm not opposed to a complaint-driven process, but it shouldn't be that you're pitting neighbor against neighbor. It should be actually that we all understand it. When you pull back from the trees and look at the forest here, we're this little village. We really are a shared project. It's not them, council, and us, villagers. It's all of us. And it needs to be thought of more like that. You work with your neighbors that way. We need to treat our businesses like these folks here, like Shack 512 and our other little businesses like businesses here. And work with them more, not go put rules that are just going to drive complaints. But I do agree that needs to be cleaned up, clarified, simplified, and it needs to be right size, fit to purpose, and fit to use for this village.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Okay, so I went through the whole morass of this stupid noise ordinance we've got out here. It was originally designed to deal with the BCRUA and, try to restrict the noise that comes out of the back of a car. Then it quickly turned into something, we can regulate RIC. Now we have this noise ordinance. But there's no enforcement. If you can't enforce your ordinances, you shouldn't have them. Our ordinances are way too complicated. Going through, you don't know how to, we don't even know what a remedy could potentially be in a lot of the ordinances that we have. And when you talk about a complaint-driven... All right,
you can.
yeah, so
Thank
we
you.
talk about a complaint-driven process. It only starts with neighbor to neighbor. It should. We don't do enough of that here. We have some folks out here that will, instead of talking to their neighbors, they just come to the city hall and say, hey, my neighbor did this. We're not building an environment where the government's here to help, not just not to be the mediator or be the heavy hand. But that starts with City Hall. You walk into the door at City Hall, and you're already wrong. Somebody's already telling you that you've done something wrong and you need to become compliant. It needs to be the other way around. And I think if we just get smart about what it is we want to do as a village, that goes back to vision, it goes back to the strategy, figure out how we put ordinances in place that are going to allow us to do this simple and easy and make it understandable. And then finally, that we got to look at the execute or the how we, not the execution side because that'd be bad, but you know how do we enforce these ordinances? And that's something, you know, I was the one who built the municipal court here in Volente. We did not build it to go off and become just a heavy-handed, you know, government instrument. We use it to be able to, we're getting there. We use it as a way to, you know, effectively as a way that we can potentially enforce, you know, bad actors.
Thank you, Chris. Bill?
Okay. I don't think when I was here, when we were incorporating, that anybody came around saying, we need to incorporate to make sure that people are building their houses right. That was,
Shh, please.
and what has happened is that we've got this complex, crazy, convoluted set of rules that nobody knows how to enforce. That's not on.
It's recording.
Oh, it's recording.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I need to get another 10 seconds on that time clock.
Keep
there.
going. Sorry.
15 seconds. We didn't incorporate to rag on our neighbors about what they're building for. We incorporated to control development. We were incorporated to keep a lid on businesses. We incorporated to keep Volente what it is. And what it was something that was built by hand most often. Now, I'm in favor of reasonable regulations, but I have been saying this for 3 years now. Simple rules, strictly enforced. Get to the basics, and then let's focus on that. Now, in speaking about enforcement, though, you've got to look at the history of what my opponents and their supporters have done. When Aquaholics changed hands, they came in and they brought in party barges. They took a sleepy sailboat marina and started doing rentals out of there. They were bringing buses up and down the street. They created new parking lots. The village did nothing. No permits required. And that was part of the zoning ordinance. They completely failed to enforce it and protect me and my neighbors. That's one of the reasons I'm running right now. The same when Sandy Creek put in gas pumps and buried gas tanks. Jan Yenawine worked on that project. Village did nothing. No permits were required. When VIP was bought out of bankruptcy, no questions asked, no permits required. At every opportunity, when the party barges are now at every major marina, or all 4 marinas in our village, the way that we got it enforced was actually Ken reaching out and talking to the barge owners and saying, okay guys, we need to work this out. So it was no village law. It was common sense and open discussions that brought that situation under control. And I think that what we need now on council is common sense and a practical approach to these situations. And we've been waiting for 2 years now for these building regulations to get done. And what I hear is process, 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 and I'm working on it, Andy.
Okay. Thank you. How are we doing, Robert, on your tape?
We got about 10 more minutes.
Okay. So with that, we're going to have the 1 minute rebuttals offered to each one of them. So with that, I'm going to start with Sean.
I mean, it sounds like we all essentially agree that the bigger problem needs to be solved first, and that is that get the right fit of purpose and fit of use of our ordinances, and then you work it from there.
Okay. Steve.
I think the question was, how should we enforce our ordinances? And I heard a lot of people talking about that we should enforce our ordinances, which I am completely for. But I think I'd love to hear the answer from Bill about how to enforce them, not just that we need to, because I think we all agree we need to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Chris.
We have a problem with too many people just doing busy work. We need leadership.
Can I assume that you're done then?
Well, I'm done. Yeah, when I sit back, I'm done.
Needy say more.
Bill.
I think that, yeah, we do all agree. And that's fairly clear that we all agree on what the common goals for the village are. And I think it's a leadership question when you have common goals, but you have different groups disagreeing on the how. And it's up to the leaders to bring those groups together and find a consensus on how things get done. And one of the reasons we're running is to provide effective leadership. And I'm going after my opponents on their record of failed leadership, quite frankly.
And with that, Andy, please.
I'm going to try to stick to the question that was asked, which was enforcement. And I happen to really like what Bill said. It's the first time I've heard it. I've been trying to come up with the catchphrase, simple rules, strictly enforced. Our MVP, the minimum viable product, a small set of ordinances enforced strictly, just the minimum set that we need out here. And enforce it from outside of the city by a third party on those rare occasions when we have to. That's pretty clear and simple to me.
Thank you. The next question I'm going to ask is a difficult one. We asked this question at the last candidates forum, and I think most people in Volente have a really positive view of Volente, but as they look back in time over the last X number of years, there's been a certain amount of divisiveness growing in Volente. And one of the tools that has been used, it's a potential positive tool, but it can be a very negative tool, and that's the next door. And I'm interested in how each of you would respond to how might we bring our community back together? How might we become better citizens on next door, and so that we can avoid, you can just pass them right along. Thank you. How can we avoid some of the real negativity that has shown up on next door? So with that, 2 minutes each. I'm going to make sure my timer is set right here. Okay. And I'm going to start this one with Chris.
Excellent. My two favorite constitutional amendments are number 1 and number 2. And you can't have number 1 without number 2. So it's so I believe you cannot restrict free speech. You need to, but I think there's another side of this point too. I think it comes from a national level. I mean, where this country is. I mean, we're completely divided, and we have a lot of very strong Facebook advocates and people that sit out there and they love their keyboards, and they get behind them, and it's unfortunately that narrative is not going to change, and it's not going to change in Volente either. But I think that one of the things that the three of us have been really trying to focus in on is actually going to talk to people, go to their doors, knock on their doors, say hi, shake their hand, look them in the eye, and understand what their concerns are and what they're excited about. We really kind of get that face-to-face conversation, because we spend so much damn time with our faces dug down in these things. And so it's really been interesting for us going over the last few months, talking to people and sitting down with them and really kind of understanding, where they want their village to go. And I think that's the only way to get there is communications, transparency, and then just don't bullshit your neighbors. Just be a nice person, So.
Thank you. Andy.
Okay. This is obviously one of the key points to me. It's a very serious issue, and I don't want to belittle it by saying something like, Rodney King's version of, hey, let's all just get along, because it doesn't work. I have a very strong issue with the keyboard and Nextdoor being the only method of communication. I noticed this in my business. I had a business that we had up to, at peak season, 3,000 orders a day, which meant 3,000 customers we were interacting with a day. And it was amazing to me when somebody didn't get something they wanted or they felt they were wronged, how quickly on the keyboard through email or other methods they could go from seemingly innocuous to I'm ready to kill you. And it just happened from behind the keyboard so fast. That is a concern. But also applying a different concept to it, or a little different look. I look at my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, and when she's cooped up inside the house and has no outlet, and she's behind her computer, she gets very frustrated. what helps her is we go outside and we do something together. And like that, it changes. And I think that's what's missing in our little 2 square mile community, is that in Volente, the keyboard, it's bizarre to me, the keyboard is our method of communication, and we're within a 2 square mile village. Yes, we can meet up here at Billy's and have some burgers and margaritas, but if we actually got involved in some projects together, shared a little sweat, did some things together, I think we could ride over the top of some bad history that we have and start appreciating accomplishments that we do together. I don't have a comprehensive list of what those could be. I think part of it is making sure we're all headed in the same direction, working on the master plan together, having, side-by-side discussions on what we want our village to be when it grows up, and that can be helpful. That's not necessarily work outside, but we're working on a common thing. And similar projects that I want to hear from you guys.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Sean.
I have a different take on this. I don't look at next door as really a problem. What I do see as a problem is when you get close to these election cycles. And that's when things get kind of weird. And I think part of the reason for that, and it's going to stem back to leadership that comes out of the council, or rather the lack of it. If people clearly understood a lot of the things that are getting considered, proposed, or otherwise focused on by our leadership in our village, I think they wouldn't be like second guessing or proposing their own weirdness out on next door. So I see a lot of it coming out of the election cycle, but by and large, you look back before this all started, there's some really helpful stuff, man. I'm still holding on to a set of keys, by the way, that I found on Lime Creek Road that I put up there and nobody's responded. But the point is this, is we do have to, I know you're probably getting tired of hearing that, but it is a shared project, this community, and we have to look at it and view it as such. We're not a big city. We're not going to become a giant municipality. It's got to be more that neighborliness that brought us all here, and treat each other. The village and its citizens should be treating each other as neighbors. It should be, it's a simple concept, and I don't want to dumb it down too much and oversimplify it, but I think it starts there with some leadership coming out of the village, so we don't just hear about a lot of things that got done, and it's like, well, where was the public comment on that? And so then people start all their little cycles on next door. So, I'd like to see the leadership coming from the village council on pushing out more communication, not looking at surveying as an event, but as a process, just like businesses go through processes of getting a good read. Hey, feed me back. Tell me what we're doing well. Tell me what we're not doing so well. What do we need to adjust? It's not rocket science.
Thank you, Sean. Steve.
I think Nextdoor is a fantastic tool, and I believe that 80% of it is really, really helpful. I love their guideline that says, be helpful, not hurtful. But unfortunately, there is about 20% that's pretty darn hurtful, especially around this time of year. Several weeks ago, let me say first, I don't believe that council should be sticking their fingers into Nextdoor. It is a free speech platform, and council shouldn't be dictating what goes on there. So I say that in preface to, I went to Ken, because I know he's the founder of Nextdoor, not because he's the mayor, and I said, wow, I just really love Nextdoor, but I think there's some things that could be done to improve it, because I have so many people coming to me and saying, gee, Steve, you participate a lot. No way am I going to go out there on Nextdoor. I'm not going to get beat up or bullied or be target practice for somebody. I just stay away. And I would really like there to be more participation in Nextdoor, and for people to feel safe, that they can say what they think and do it in a kind way. So I asked him, and he said, well, maybe we should have a meeting with the leads, and we've tried for a few weeks to do that, and for whatever reason that hasn't happened. But I would like for the leads maybe to work with this on trying to get it to be a little friendlier, to talk about ideas. I think that educating the community of people that use it more about, hey, when somebody does get a little bit out of line, maybe here's a way that not just the leads can kind of speak to them, but other people can. I myself, when I feel like somebody's gotten out of line on things related to me, I will private message them and say, hey, you said this, I don't really think it's accurate. Would you mind changing that? Because I don't think it's fair, and I'll try to work it out. without ever going and publicly attacking them back. Having a little mantra for when somebody does kind of get out of line, saying, "Hey, could you please be helpful, not hurtful?" I don't know, but things like that. And then maybe last I'd say, I would, and no, gosh, I know there's some leads here today, but I would like to see some more diversity among the leads that maybe have a few different points of view than what I see being represented there right now, that might open
Steve?
it up
Yep, thank
some
you.
more.
Okay, and Bill?
I think that a big part of the problem is it's a larger issue. It's not just next door. It's people that are upset with the village government, and there's a break between what the people want or expect of the government and what the council is delivering. And what ends up happening is they start getting involved in the village. They start trying to make some positive change, and they realize that there's a brick wall separating them from actually proactively or positively doing anything. It's impossible to make changes. And so they quit or leave in frustration and vent on next door. Then the other side hears it and they get their heels dug in and they're fighting back and it escalates. And I think, a big part of it is the nasty politics in Volente. 2 years ago, we had a defamatory letter sent out the day before election. It was awful. And here this week, I'm a little bit upset and a little bit on edge because my opponents have sent out 3 letters making stuff up about my platform and what I'm talking about. And yeah, I'm not happy about that. And I would rather they stick to the issues and stick to the facts. I've been trying for 2 months to run a very positive campaign. I've tried to keep it off of Nextdoor. Can't control everybody, but I think that, a lot of it has to do with those nasty politics. I mean, and we've seen it time and time again, and we need to stop it. And we need to change the leadership, I think, in the village. And we need to open things up and get some diverse points of view. And then we also fundamentally need to deliver what was promised with incorporation: small government, reasonable rules, some level of control and say over what the businesses are doing. And I think you would solve a lot of the problems and complaints that way.
Thank you, Bill. 1 minute rebuttal. I'll start with Steve.
So I take it, Bill, you're maybe referring to my letter as being one of the letters that went out. And my only rebuttal there is that in my letter, I don't know exactly what you believe and what your platform is. I only have to go on what's on the Voice of Volente website. And I quoted that in my letter. I didn't make anything other than quotes. And I quoted again. It says, "There is little need for other city services. Travis County provides police protection, emergency service, fire protection. The LCRA already enforces septic, impervious cover, and runoff laws. The only service missing is road and right-of-way maintenance."
True.
So that's just right off the website. So
This is true.
Keep, wait. Shh. Done, Steve?
yes.
Okay. Then I'm going to ask Andy.
Okay. Next door. Back to the issue. Next door is a great place. I can see us talking about the coyotes that are running down the street. I can see us talking about our furniture for sale. I think if we can get together in some other format, face to face, eye to eye, and talk about issues on a regular basis and share some sweat, we can find out we like our neighbors. We can find out there's a lot of things about them we appreciate and enjoy, and talk through issues over a beer. And we won't see that on Nextdoor, but we got to have another outlet. We got to have some other venue where we can go to do this. Multiples, trails, parks. What others? I can't see it under my glasses on. Celebrations, master plan, other things. Ideas from the community. Love to have them.
Thank you, Andy. And then finally, let's see, Chris?
Yeah, so one of the, you got to work? Yeah, awesome. One of the, I was thinking, oh my God, the voice of God. One of the ethos that when I was in the military is, you deal with things at their lowest level. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, about sitting down, talking to your neighbors. Usually it's Sean and I. If I get mad at Sean, I bring a bottle of wine to his house and we hash it out. And it doesn't happen very often, but anyways, it's just the big thing about it's about communications, it's about trust, and it's about integrity. Integrity about, you know, say what you do, say what you do what you say. And I think next door is going to be there. I'm actually one of the reasons why your kids can't spell, because I founded a company called iChat, that we built the very first instant messaging product. And we had this same problem back in 1996 when we put this out in the marketplace and Yahoo bought it. And it's like people get behind their keyboards, they get really comfortable, and they make bad decisions. And the only way to redirect that is to have personal interactions with people.
Thank you. Sean?
Then I get a rebut. You know, I listen to all this, and where I take an issue is having different personas. And what I mean by that is negative, disinformation, misinformation, and outright lie persona in snail mail and email. If you're on Nextdoor, if you're nice there, but consistency. It's like, I think anybody would agree that knows me, I'm not kind of shy about expressing an opinion, but I will express that to you in person. I will express it the same way on Nextdoor, and I'm not going to mislead or create disinformation or misinformation about it. And I think it does, you hit on a key point, it does tie back to integrity. And you have to keep that above everything. And so that would be the point I would make about that. Be consistent in your personas.
Perfect, thank you. Right now, I would like to transition into an opportunity for the community that's here to ask questions. Already seen one hand up.
Can we get a rebuttal?
No, you just got the rebuttal.
Did we get?
Yeah,
Did we get rebuttals?
everybody got two and everybody got a one, yeah. And so, what I'd ask, if at all possible, we are recording.
Thank you,
If at
ma'am.
all possible, if you could get up and stand at that microphone. I'd like your question to be as clear as can be, and I'd like you to state whether or not you want to ask all the candidates to respond. And we're going to give the candidates 2 minutes to respond. It's 2 into 1. So I've got, I see you, I've got Scott up there, David. So Scott, if you would step forward. Again, I'm going to be timing everything. I'd ask everybody to respect the time.
Do you want us to line up, or do you want to acknowledge?
We're small enough that you can get over there when he
Go
gets done.
online? Just go online?
Go online?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine, absolutely. Go ahead, Scott.
My name is Scott Sperlin. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming up here and being part of this forum. The question I have, and something that's always bothered me for the last 3 or 4 years, is it seems like every entity always starts with a vision. Out of the vision drops a comprehensive plan. Out of that comprehensive plan should drop site planning ordinances and P&Z. I see the village going about this backwards. I'd like to have each one of you comment about that.
Okay, I'm just wondering, because there's a lot of people want to ask questions. Yeah, you want to ask to all of them? And would you guys mind if I just give you a 1 minute?
Yeah.
1 minute chance to respond? Then we'll get more of the community involved. So with that, if you don't mind, I will start with Bill.
I think the comprehensive plan is critical. I also believe that we live at the end of, it's very simple, we live at the end of a 2-lane, no-pass country road. We have no city water or city sewer, and so we are limited in the density we can handle and the environmental impact of dense development. I think that my initial plan in 2015 was to do the comprehensive plan simultaneous with the zoning ordinance and 2-track it, one through P&Z and the other through council. It didn't work out that way, and I regret that now. I would have taken it on in council, then passed it to P&Z. But I think it's very important that we work on the comprehensive plan and identify as a community what our common goals are.
Thank you. Andy?
Scott, agree with you 100%. Comprehensive plan is a foundation, and it's old. It was created, 15, 16 years ago. Perhaps it's in line, but we don't know because we haven't revised it. And 2 years ago, when I got on council, that was one of our big discussions in early spring with the mayor and part of this group. Where do we start? How do we go? We need to start with the comprehensive plan. But it was discussed and agreed with Bill, with Christy, and others, that there is some critical low-hanging fruit and some pain in the community with the ordinance and stuff, and we need to get those knocked out first. And that's the direction that was chosen by the council, and we went with zoning first, to be followed by site development, and then we would get back to comprehensive plan, which has been discussed many times. Seems to be backwards, but that's the path that was chosen, and we stood in our marching orders and went forward to make it happen.
Okay, with that, Sean.
Okay, so the way I look at this is, I think that's a great question, and I look at it as a kind of a strategic problem, because much like you use in project management, a work breakdown structure, so you can break things down eventually from phases to activities and a task that gets done. We need more of a structure, of a strategic planning structure. You start at that high level, that vision level, that comprehensive plan. You, from there, break it down into 3 or 4 strategies or objectives that are going to get you there. You further break that down to 3 or 4 items that are going to fall into an agenda, and then further break that down into the initiatives. And you got to put schedules on these things. It's not, I mean, the point of having a plan is to plan to get stuff done. And you have to constrain those plans around your natural constraints. And again, the will of the people is the biggest overriding constraint. Second, human resource. Third, financial resources.
Thank you, Sean. Steve?
Yeah, I agree. Who wouldn't agree that the comprehensive plan is important? That's the foundation for everything we do from that. When I joined council, the decision had already been made to work on the zoning ordinance. So our council decided to just kind of continue on, since so much good progress had been made on the zoning ordinance. We did, at least a year ago, turn over that project of the redoing the comprehensive plan, because my gosh, it's a huge document that it's kind of been written and then put up on the shelf. It's just too monstrous and too generalized, really, for it to be much use. So everybody agreed it needed to be done, but the proper process is that planning and zoning develops that comprehensive plan. Then they bring it to council. So about a year ago, we turned it over, and planning and zoning struggled with how huge of a document that is, did not get too far on it. So this year, council approved a $25,000 budget to hire an outside consultant to help with that process. And looking forward to it getting done.
Thank you. And finally, Chris.
So I've launched several businesses. Every business that I've done always starts with the vision, and it starts with the business plan. You have to sit down, you have to do the hard stuff to write that. You revisit that every 6-7 months to make sure you're on track as you launch a business and get it up and running. That's what executives do. That's what executive leadership is. And partly this comes back to you, but you don't have the willing participants to help you to put that stake in the ground, do the top 3 to 5 things that we need to do. If we need to dump the comprehensive plan, great, but it starts with the vision, and we lost that. Just going off and having 15 to 20 different projects that you're doing that's busy work. That's not leadership. And we need to get back to that. We need to start running this more like a company, more like a business.
Thank you, Chris. The next question.
Okay, so am I good? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so Mike and I have lived out here 22 years. 3 years ago, we bought some property across the street from us that was owned by Rick Redmond. Mm-hmm. And we've been through a process with all of that. And I think the stickler of the whole thing, or what I really want to say here, is that one day going in and out of the offices for the different things that I had to turn in and do and I said, and one day I came in and Ken said, Nicole's not here. She's at a secretary meeting. City secretary, is that right? Mm-hmm. And so when I saw her the next time, I said, how was your meeting? And she goes, she's like, everyone says, you're doing what in the village of Volente? This does not it was over and beyond. This is not how we do things. This is, you know what I'm saying? It's like everyone is doing it one way, and when they hear her story, it's just a totally different thing, and they're going, oh my God, I can't believe that. So I just want to say there's some something going on there that maybe whoever is going to be voted in might want to go to some other city meetings to see really how things are done, and maybe that could solve some problems.
Do you have a specific question?
No, I don't have a question. I'm just telling some information, and I'm sorry. I
Okay,
just wanted to
that's
share
okay.
that. I just wanted to
Okay.
share that.
To respond.
I'd like a response.
Please.
I keep hitting my head on this. Okay, so let's go ahead and start then. Bill, would you like to respond? Each person has a minute.
Yeah, and actually, full disclosure, Mike and Debbie are my next door neighbors, and I appreciate them because they are buying the lots across the street to make sure they stay residential come what may. And really, what I would do first, specifically in your situation, is I would adopt Travis County rules for minor replats and combinations. The plats always end up at Travis County anyhow, so why not just design the rules the way they set them up and follow that process? And I believe I hear what you're saying on why does Volente do it that way? Well, we've got a bunch of amateurs making it up, and you're absolutely right. We should reach out, find examples of where it's being done right, and adopt those processes and procedures. You've been 3 years on this project, and it shouldn't have lasted more than 4 to 6 months at most. And it's crazy. I'm sorry, but trying to change
Okay,
it.
Andy?
From my understanding, the question was regarding proper processes inside of our office and working. So there are some other friends over here that are discussing work breakdown structures, processes, project management, all the ways to do it right. And Bill himself actually said, let's go look at some other villages to see and cities to see how they do
That's not
things
what I
right.
said.
It's okay.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought I said we should look at other cities to see how their
Just-
processes are.
Just make your point.
Okay, that's one of the things that I very strongly believe in because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I really believe there are other communities that have done an excellent job figuring things out. They have professionals in place, and we are amateurs, as Bill said, and there's no reason for us to be trying to recreate everything from scratch. If we look out there and find somebody else who's done it well, they've paid the dollars, they've gone through the pain and hardship, it's been tested, proven, tried, let's find that, the best ones, grab the core of that in its intact section and use that as the core for what we do.
Perfect. Sean?
You know, what you're pointing to is what in the software business we refer to, there's two ways we deal with that. One is what we call a reference architecture, and I think Andy's kind of somewhat touched on that. And then also the idea of best practices. We don't want to do and reinvent new things and do them in new and interesting ways. There's a lot of good references out there that we can borrow from, and there's best practices that we can employ as a functioning, government organization. I think that is needed.
Good enough. Okay, Steve?
Just opening comment. Bill, I don't know why you keep saying that we've been working on this for 3 years.
Okay, just
Andy
let
made it very clear that it was in March of this year that we formed a committee to work on the site development ordinance. And that's about, 6, 7 months. So that's how long we've been working on it. And kind of responding to what you said, the mayor has taken some steps to learn what other areas are doing. He's formed a consortium of other mayors where they get together from time to time to discuss how they handle issues within the city. We do look to TML for expert advice from time to time. We obviously don't get it all right, and we really kind of messed up between planning and zoning and council, the process that you had to go through. And I still apologize for that. When it finally did come to council, at least I can look at you and say, hey, the first time I heard it, I think we quickly put together a list of all the things that were missing and promised to get that to you and to try to get it moving forward. But I apologize because your process was bobbled.
Okay. Thank you. Chris?
From what I understand, your whole thing was an unnecessary nightmare, and that's part of the reason why we've gotten together and kind of decided to step up and try to make it a little bit easier for you guys because you're friends, you're neighbors. And Steve is absolutely right about. I think one of the things we are all a bunch of volunteers. We do volunteer our time and don't get paid for it. But one of the things that was very effective when I was on council was using the TML and other networking organizations to be able to go off and talk to other elected officials and whomever to really kind of get feedback and instances so we don't blindly go off and deploy ordinances that have a mining ordinance that we don't need. So, yeah, a query, yeah. So, but that's all. It's just it's a learning process.
Thank you.
Thanks,
We'll move
Debbie.
To the next lady in the line. Thank you, Debbie.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Yang. I live on Brandy Way, and I moved here last year. So I don't know any of you people and the background and the history. I have no affiliation with anyone. But I want to know, and this question is for all of y'all, I want to know what you envision to see in Volente, like next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because you talk about a master plan, and I don't know what this master plan is, but I want to know, I mean, there are specific reasons why we moved from to Volente, and I'm worried from what I read that the reason why I moved here is not going to be here in a few years. So my question is, what do you see here 5 years from now? Like the strip, this area, because I live right over there, and if I wanted to live near lots of noise and lots of congestion, I would have stayed where I was at, right? So that's my question. I don't care about political affiliation or any of that shit. I just want to live in my peaceful community, right? So my question is, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, do we need to attract business here? What kind of business do we need here? What about the traffic, etc.?
So I'm going to wish you guys the best in 1 minute to answer that.
Sure, I'll start.
Like I
'Cause
try
it's you.
to
But just-
decipher information from
Just
next
a
door.
snapshot. Yep.
Sure. Jennifer, first of all, welcome to the community. And, I don't think it's going to change a whole lot in 5 years or really 10 years. Little changes like the amenities that I think most of us have all agreed we want, like the coffee shop where we can hang out, have coffee, and get a few items like we used to be able to do at VJ's, things like that. But you look at the natural constraints of this area, you can't widen that road. I mean, in and out of here. Even if you widen, put some cement around here. But it's going to have a play in all this. There's some natural constraints that will have a play in all of this. But I think more than anything, the will of the people is that we don't want a big crowded area, and we don't want a lot of noise and congestion. And that's what worries me the most about the PDD. And that's why I think that is one of the biggest threats to that quality of life.
Thank you, Sean. Steve?
I don't visualize anything that creates traffic problems, parking problems, outdoor amplified music problems. I don't see that sort of thing happening out here. I think we all agree, and probably everyone that would be on council would like to just improve what we have, keep doing like what Beachside Billy's has to improve this place, do with VJ's what's being planned with the coffee shop, grocery store, restaurant. I think those are all wonderful things. But to tell you the most important thing that I would like to see change over the next 5 to 10 years is, I haven't been here very long myself, 4 years. And I don't really understand or relate to some of the hurt feelings that are out here about things that happened in the past. And I would really like to see that maybe there could be some healing, some bringing together of the community, some of the things that I think aren't happening anymore, but that people are still upset about that happened years ago that I don't even personally understand. So I would like to see those things healed and us be working towards what seems to be an awful lot of common goals among the group.
Thank you, Steve. Bill?
Jennifer, I'm really glad you came out. I've knocked on your door a couple times, wanted to meet you and Chris. Met Mary and David earlier, but I'm sure you guys... Anyhow, the vision I have for the next 5 years is what you see right now. Just the same thing. That's my vision for Volente. Maybe some improvement, and if there's any added commercial, I'd like to see VJ's renovated and a coffee shop down there, maybe a grocery and another bar or restaurant bar or whatever. I'd love to see that. I'd also like to see limited density growth. I don't want Volente Peak to go through. I'm very concerned about it. We haven't even talked about that subject tonight. If anybody wants to ask a question. And I would like to connect with you and Chris at some point and talk more in depth about what we're after, what we're trying to do. But my vision would be more of the same. And if we add anything, it would be, you know, local services like a small retail or maybe professional offices, but definitely low traffic. I live right at the end of Lakeview Street where the Beach Club parking lot is, around in the back, you know, so, and you see that. So I deal with the traffic all the time. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Andy?
Me. I've heard a story, you know, oftentimes over the years of when you're a kid and you're growing up in your family's house, you leave and go off to do something, and you spend the rest of your life trying to get back what you had. I want that. My vision with that, when I was sold my property out here about 17 years ago, was there was VJ's. They had a little store where you could get milk and bread and sit in there and drink beer and wine with Francois and Shipley, the developers out here. And they told stories to me of bicycle paths and walking paths where we could come down here to this location, drink alcohol, and walk a few hundred yards back to our house or a half a mile back to our house or across the street like you, or down there, or bike around, golf cart around, and get to everything in the village because we're so tight. We can go to people's houses and have parties and good times because that's what was happening back in 2000 when I came. And somehow VJ's closed. What was sold to me was those ideas on the bicycle paths faded away, and I never had what was sold to me.
Hey, Chris?
Hey, Andy, have you ever talked to Shipley or Francois and them not having any wine? Yeah, lots of good wine. They're interesting cats. I agree with everybody here. I think, you know, we all want the same thing for our village. We moved out here to have a simpler, cleaner, country-style life, and we're all raising families and kids here, and it's nice to have my kids isolated out here because, you know, I don't want them to, you know, have to deal with Steiner Ranch or River Place and all the stupid things that those knuckleheads do. But the other side of that too is there's some fundamental things we have to change here in the village, and it comes back down to, you know, are we running our village? You know, we don't really provide any services. We have one sidewalk out here, and that's it. And so, so we just I think we need to, get there, but we need to kind of get back to kind of being better neighbors, better transparency in government, consistency, honesty, integrity, those times, motherhood and apple pie stuff.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nancy, are you in line?
I had to get that in there.
Okay. Okay.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Can you hear me? You're good. Okay. I've been out here since '96. I was Francois and Hugo's neighbors, so I've heard it all, been through it all, and I thought the reason we incorporated back then was to stop the peak and leave us alone. The Volente Peak.
They were Volente Peak.
Shh, okay. Let her speak, please.
Not originally.
Go ahead.
And leave us alone. Since I'm in and out of town all the time, I'm not here all the time, I don't really care to be here now all the time because of everything that's going on. And I was a true Valentian. But now, I have 2 small lots, and when y'all pass the ordinances, and I'm not referring to y'all, I'm referring to the city council, I now lost my small lot. I can't sell my small lot because you have to have an acre to build on. Well, who's gonna buy that? What are you gonna do with it? What am I gonna do with it? Y'all were talking earlier about help the city financially. What about helping us financially? We're number one. The city's not number one. So if you're gonna pass an ordinance, you make sure it's financially helpful to us, not the city. And that's my piece.
Okay. I'm gonna give you.
Rebuttal? Okay.
No, yeah, they're gonna respond to you. So I'm gonna let Steve first, because you're talking about some ordinances that are passed. We may know something about that. Steve?
Oh, I'm sorry about your lot and that the situation you're in. I really don't have anything to say. I'm not familiar with that situation.
What about my small
Your lot,
being
your small
taken
lot
away?
not being able to be sold.
In general. All of them are small lots around here. What's happened to them? They can't build.
Yeah, we did a lot of changes to our zoning ordinance related to small lots, reducing impervious cover, reducing setbacks, allowing reconstruction to be built up. Yeah, there's been a lot of changes in the new zoning ordinance that was just passed a little less than a year ago.
Less than a year, when was that?
In October last year?
November.
Yeah,
November?
Okay.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can feel your pain a little bit. When I first came out here, I bought, and normally the process is you follow the HOA, and it's usually much the stricter thing to follow. And so I went about, the village was in a little bit of a flux. I bought in 2004, and then they didn't have the ordinances adopted, so I went ahead with the HOA because that's what I knew and that's what the builders told me to do. I got a design, spent a lot of money on the design, then I brought it to the village, and they're like, no way, Jose. You're not going to meet the side yard setbacks and all this stuff, because they were actually a lot stricter than the HOA. Had to go through variance, and it was a nightmare. So the problem was a lot of those lots in that village at Volente, they're kind of thin, narrow, and long. And yeah, they're an acre. It's not the under an acre problem, but I totally relate to what you're talking about. And it was stressful, emotionally, and intellectually trying to understand it. And my builder, when I did finally get building, was ready to just walk away.
Well, I thank you for, I know you
Yep.
redid something, and I haven't read it again in November, where I get my lot back. So maybe now I can sell that lot. But I mean,
Let me let them finish responding to you. Bill?
Yeah, I did everything I possibly could to legalize the small historical lots that were forgotten about when they passed the first zoning ordinance. I'd like to point out that my opponents, Andy wasn't there, but he wrote in a letter saying he was opposed to us passing the ordinance. Steve voted against it. Kit Hopkins voted against it. And the reason I wanted to get that done was because so many people in building were having to get variances. 2 in every 3 projects required 1 or more variances. After we passed that ordinance, 1 variance in all of 2017, and they denied a guy, an old guy, who wanted an elevator in his house. I don't know why. But we're trying to make it fair for the people that have existing lots and make it possible for them to do something with their lots. I'm not sure about your particular situation, but I'd like to talk to you about it. And I know a lot about the rules. I've read a lot of them, and maybe there's something we can figure out. Don't know without really looking at the
Thank you, Bill.
situation, though.
Andy?
Yes, I strongly encourage you to go down to the village hall and talk with Nicole. She has a builder's package and has the latest information on the zoning ordinance, which was voted in by the other council in November of last year, right before the election. Then this council had to fix and repair some sections of it because it wasn't functional. It was put in too early. We all put lots of hours and time into it to take care of folks like you that do have small lots. A lot of these little fishing villages or fishing lots or fishing cabin lots in areas where they're just smaller and crammed together, they don't fit well. But Bill was absolutely accurate in saying that the ordinances did change.
It's okay, it's okay.
Changed the ordinances so that variances on those types of lots went down from about 12 average per year to just 1. So you may be able to build or sell your lot as a
Andy?
buildable lot. Sorry.
Thank you. Chris?
No, I think it's what council has done. When I was on council, we typically had, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood about 6 to 7 variances for each project that came in front of us, and it was just very time consuming. It was confusing, and there's a reason why developers don't, or not developers, but builders won't even build out here. It's just because it's spaghetti. It's just a morass of all this stuff, and so it's nice to see that the good work that folks have done to get the number of variances down. But you're absolutely right. Everything is on a case-by-case basis. I'd actually, with Bill, I'd like to learn a little bit more about your situation, and as we move forward, we can see if there's a way we can help. So.
I understand all that, and I guess my pain is, this is my rebuttal, is that why did it take so long from the time we incorporated for me now to get my little lot back? I mean, that's the pain of everybody, is having to wait and wait and wait for us to, I've not been able to move on in life. I could have sold that years ago and gone on.
So just as a quick response, we as councils, even the historic councils, acknowledge that in the village of Volente, there are a lot of lots that are under 1 acre in size. There are a lot of lots. I'm just answering a question.
I know, we're supposed to answer questions.
I'm going to invite the lady
Go ahead, Ken.
to come over to City Hall so we can meet with you, because I think there are ways that you can use your lot, and that zoning ordinance does indeed give you more flexibility. So with that, next person with a question.
Well, Ken,
Yeah.
so Bill mentioned something specific about me, so I think I'm allowed to reply to that briefly.
I was asking him not to respond, so I'm asking you not to as well. I don't want to get into personal back and
Well,
forth.
let's go back and forth once.
When
on
you
the-
get a rebuttal. No.
Play nice.
So Nancy, yep, into the mic.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I want to congratulate all of you for being here today. I love some of the, well, most of the experiences that you've got a lot of talent on this 5-people board here. But I heard a lot about public input. I heard a lot about working with the community. I would like to see that happen. I hear it every election, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because we have a lawsuit going on. The village has a lawsuit against Travis County to acquire Mulberg Park, which is a piece of land that is steep, that Travis County really doesn't want because it's going to cost too much to develop it. So far, we have $6,000 into a lawsuit, not quite 6,000, it's 5,400, into a lawsuit. You've had a couple of executive sessions, which the public wasn't able to put any input into, and my understanding is the lawsuit is still going on. So my question, starting with and going down, is if we would acquire the Travis County, which is probably not going to happen, how are we going to obtain it? Because we're going to need patrols, we're going to need it developed, we're going to need a lot of stuff that's going to be required. We have an estimate for the village hall, which is going to happen someplace, but just getting the land so they can build on it is like $360,000. And that's not a lawsuit going on. I mean, it's just a fact of life. I want to know how you're going to respond to that.
So I'm good. Yes, thank you. I'm going to allow Andy to start. Since he's
Okay.
been-
Thank you. That's one of my pet projects, obviously, on environmental. And the first thing is, I believe that's one of the biggest assets potentially owned by, or could be owned by the city. Our bank account is $600,000 to $800,000 in that range. That property could theoretically be valued comparably to the property next to it, somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million. So it could be the largest asset that the village owns, potentially. But also, how would we maintain it and take care of it? One of your key questions. Well, ever since 1941, when it was deeded over to this area, no one's done anything to take care of it and maintain it, and it hasn't been a problem yet. But I did want to go in there with a set of Boy Scouts, almost went to jail doing it. Mayor emailed me and told me I needed to stop, otherwise we were going to be trespassing, and clear some trails and some paths, little walking area. There's some other folks in the community that have some interest in maybe having a dog park, some light clearing. But what actually we do with the property once we get it, that's up to us. We could even theoretically sell it back to Travis County. Top side is steep, bottom side's relatively flat, and it has a nice view.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Sean?
Yeah, I don't have detailed understanding of it. I've been driven by there. Just at a cursory glance and living out here for 10 years, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to make that into a park for I think some obvious reasons because of maintenance and probably even more important, liability. If we start allowing people and people start actually going there, and I don't even think that's that viable. So I really question the wisdom of marching down that path.
Okay. Now I'm going to let all 5 of them respond. You asked your question?
One at a time, though. I mean, starting from this end.
Well, I'll go back.
I don't want to go back. I want to start from this end and go that way.
Andy's already responded, so I'm going to invite Steve.
Thank you.
Okay.
And public, the survey we had in 2014, people would like parks out here, but they don't want any money spent on it. So I don't even know how you can justify it. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, neighbor, for your question. We're one house apart. So, boy, I don't know how to answer it any really better other than just explain it differently than what Andy did. He's the expert on this. But we do have, from what our attorney tells us, a very, very strong case that could just be a simple summary judgment that we get to win that property back. And it is, as you said, a huge asset that could even be sold. Doesn't really require any maintenance at this point, but it gives us something. I mean, when we get that land, we could have it, I mean, forever, right? It's tax-free since it's part of the city. And I don't know, we could put a simple bike trail on it. We could have it be just left natural until we decide that there's something really we want to use it for. It just seems to me when you have something that's worth that much money, that if for a few $1,000s you could get it back, it would probably be a good idea to hang on to that asset.
We already have 6,000.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Drop it, move on. We've got bigger things to deal with.
Thank you.
Okay. Bill?
I love the concept that it's worth like $500 to $1 million because it's a park.
Yeah.
And it always will be a park. And so if Travis County buys it from us or somehow, I don't think they're going to pay us full retail value of what the property is worth. Personally, on this one, I think the sticker is that if you've got any resident of that subdivision objecting to any change in the use of it, then any of the plans that have been discussed up here are out the window. And so, I think the first thing to do is communicate with the neighbors up there, ask them what their thoughts are, or find out what they want to do with it. And if there is any potential objection from a neighbor up there to any of the changes, then all these plans don't make sense. So first thing you got to do is talk to the citizens. You got to reach out. You got to get out from behind the council desk and ask the hard questions.
And I think you should
Thank you,
get
Bill.
input from
Yeah.
Got
the
it.
citizens.
Thank you, Nancy. Please respect the questioner. Please be quiet.
Gentlemen, I'll have to follow Nancy in saying I'm really impressed. You've got 5 people who seem passionate and articulate. You seem knowledgeable. We're fortunate as a village to have you guys willing to volunteer your time and efforts, so I really appreciate it. I'm also going to follow what Scott took up. Oh, Scott left. First question, or really the first statement in a lot of ways, and that's the importance of what I originally heard was the master plan, or now I hear it's called the comprehensive plan. That's not a document just to kind of set the foundation, which is so critical to us as a community, but it's also to help bring the community together. And so, if anything that I see in kind of the chaos that's kind of ensued over the years is this lack of vision, this lack of master plan, and alignment among the community on it. I also heard transparency being discussed. I heard community involvement. If there's any place that I think you can leverage the community's involvement in helping align and bring us together is through that master plan. Do we really need an outside consultant to help us? I don't know. We can question that. But the reality is we need to get people's ideas and involvement in it. And then we need them to validate. My question to you is, do you support getting the public involved in it, whether it's through town halls, you create another committee, which by the way is a whole nother subject to me about committees, but on a volunteer government. But do you create a way to get that input into the vision statement and the master plan? And then, more importantly, will you support taking it to a referendum to the community? Because once we have the community, it's not about who's in charge at the time or who's got the power to deal with how the survey is put together, interpreting maybe the community's dialogue or input. That way, if we can put it in front of the community and we get alignment on it, then I think we can go a long way. So I kind of got on my soapbox, but the question's still there. I'd like to know which one of you guys would support that.
Okay, we're going to start with Bill. Bill?
I absolutely support what you're talking about, Dan. I think we need to get kind of almost a constitution is what you're talking about. Basically, I mean, at fundamental level, you know, what you're talking about is how are we going to govern ourselves and how do we see this thing progressing and growing over the years? And what's been sorely lacking from the get-go is real, true community input. And we've got the surveys, yeah, but you get up here and then there's arguments back and forth on, well, this says this and this says that, and I want this and I want that. And a lot of times, you know, that we've seen them completely depart from the survey. So I agree wholeheartedly with what you're talking about, getting something like that cast in stone and being able to hang our hats on it and say, no, this is how we operate. This is what we as a community wanted. I'm absolutely 100% behind what you're talking about. And thank you for volunteering, Dan. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're going to lead that. Dude.
Thank you, Bill. Andy?
Yes, Dan, thank you. Excellent question. And it's one of the items on my letter that I sent out that we need to get community involvement in. As a matter of fact, just last week on Monday night, we interviewed our new lawyer for the community who has a large staff and has someone that can help with the master planning, the comprehensive plan. But I wasn't happy with just that answer. I specifically questioned the lawyer. Can you have someone out here that can guide the people, not just write up a master plan and hand it to us, but can get people in the room, some whiteboards, and get community involvement to really hash out what do we want to be when we grow up? And that was my kind of drilling on him, because I think that's really what's necessary. And that is at the core behind everything, our direction, where we go, all our ordinances, everything should be stacked up right on top of that and reference that. And once we get that figured out with community involvement, I truly believe a lot of the issues and bickering will go, not all of it, but a lot of it will go away if it's clearly defined and well done. Sorry.
Thank you. Sean?
You know, I looked as I was walking out and getting input from people. One of the things that really struck me that a few people called out is they say, you know what, it's fine if it's you or if it's someone else. It's every 2 or 3 years, these election cycles, people are coming through and we're looking for some continuity. And to use an analogy, a building analogy, what you're talking about is critical, because it's like putting scaffolding in place. You're going to have the carpenters come in and put up the frame. Then you're going to bring in the guys that put up the Tyvek, and then you're going to bring in the guys that complete it out with the stucco. So it really is that important to putting that kind of foundational structure in place. And you're going to have your elections, you're going to have people come in and come out. But when you have that kind of structure, you get that kind of continuity, and it's not so dependent on the election process.
Okay. Chris?
So, Dan, I really do appreciate you volunteering for that. And I heard you just retired. I think one of the things that we do, we tend to build ordinances, build planning. You know, I call them mushroom ordinances. Everything's done in the dark around here, and then all of a sudden we get a document or a set of ordinances 95% complete, and that's fantastic. So, but the problem is that getting people involved in the community is there's just a fundamental different break between our community and our elected officials, and part of that is partly by design, I think, because it's easy. You know, you do all the work, and then you expect and you don't get anybody to step up and say, hey, I'm willing to help you. But so you have to build the conditions to make sure that, number one, you have you do the planning, you get it done right, like Sean was saying, you build that foundation. The second piece of that is you get community involvement, you get people to come in and help out and give them ownership of it, as opposed to just, oh, thanks for your time. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing is accountability. And our elected officials, our accountability is every 2 years. And sometimes it's not the easiest 2 years you'll ever have, but you've got to have accountability, and we typically, that's the only accountability we have right now, is getting, elect the throughout the bums.
Haven't met you before. You're very well spoken. The current council completely agree with you on that we just didn't really have a good repeatable process that was efficient for writing and amending ordinances and comprehensive plans. So earlier this year, Andy actually authored a new ordinance that council unanimously approved for a documented process for us creating or amending an ordinance. And we are very much trying to follow that process. And the comprehensive plan is one that's in that process, as well as even more, because it requires with the comprehensive plan somewhat differently than other ordinances. We actually have to start with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so that's what we did. And they did kind of get stuck with it. And so we've been trying to get them some help to get that done. And to respond directly to your question, I think what you described as a process is excellent. So it goes through planning and zoning, it goes out for public hearings, there's participation from the community. I do believe that we need, I know you said you questioned whether we need experts. I actually do think we could use experts in helping us with that.
I'm going to rebut a little
Did
bit
you-
myself. No, because my question wasn't answered, and in all fairness, not one person answered my question. The master plan is the foundation of this community. It doesn't change willy-nilly. It doesn't have a process to change. Not one of you answered my question. Who will go for a referendum on the master plan? No, I won't. I'm asking them in the public forum. Sorry, I split.
I'll go to a referendum, Dan. I'll take it to a referendum.
I will.
All right. Thank you.
Next question is going to be with Carrie.
Thanks, Ken. I haven't heard this question asked, but it's the most concerning to me out here is the PDD. You know, the traffic that it will bring and who knows what else is ahead of us. And I'd just like to know what you guys think about that.
Do you understand the question? Your thoughts on the PDD?
Oh, it's me first?
I'm just asking you guys in general, how are you going to respond?
One at a time, or all of us? Who goes
Once
first?
we all talk at once.
We can all
start.
talking at once.
I came in on the tail end of the PDD. I guess there's an agreement or the settlement, and this was a very brutal, very very difficult process that we went through to get this thing, to come to some compromise. And it's really, I think the compromise is, it typically in any litigation, everybody thinks they have it's, at the end of it, if you're the first one to feel the worst, then you got the best deal. And so, but I think what has happened over time is I agree. I don't want the PDD. I don't want 300 houses up on top of the hill. It just changes the quality of life. It changes the traffic. It'll change pretty much everything about living out here. I personally don't think that. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think anything is really going to be developed up there anytime soon. And I think that as long as we keep tabs on it and keep control of it, then I think we'll be able to control our own destiny.
Andy.
From my understanding, the PDD is a contractual obligation that we have made with a couple of developers, and we have to uphold our end of the deal if they uphold our end of the deal. If we fail to do that, it could likely be a very, very expensive deal for the village of Volente. And my understanding is the PDD was negotiated in a fairly nice way, where it actually reduces the total number of homes and forces them to bring in water from Cedar Park as opposed to every individual drilling their own wells, which taps into all of our water supplies. So it appears to be a very good thing for the community if there's going to be development up there, compared to if the PDD fails and goes away, and suddenly you can have housing built up there in the same way as anywhere else in Volente, potentially more dense than the PDD allows, and with more taps into the water system than the PDD has. So I think the best bet is that the PDD goes through. If anything, other alternatives suddenly open it up to a lot more potential risk and problems.
Okay, Sean.
I think the PDD, as it stands right now, it's a big question mark. And that's one of the issues I take with the current council is that I don't see the leadership of getting ahead. And by that I mean there is some expirations with respect to a $200,000 payment or something in that neighborhood and 3 acres that is supposed to come to the village out of that. And that's what I hear and read is that maybe it's been extended. I'm not quite sure. It goes to the end of this year. It's still kind of unclear, but the point is there's some type of expirations. In other words, there's some kind of leverage there. And it's not a great deal. 300 homes on that hill is not a great deal in my estimation. As I say, the poop rolls downhill. But I mean, I don't personally want to see 300 homes go up there. If we can do better than that, then I want to use our leverage to do better than that.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
This is a very large and complex topic, and so I don't know that I can do it justice in 1 minute. But right in front of me here is all the legislation and the agreements for the PDD dating back to 2003 when we passed a MUD agreement. I'm deeply concerned that our current council got their eye off the ball, and I would expect that they would have a better explanation for us about what's going on than what I've saw in the letters that they sent out last week and on Steve Baker's website. We get 2 conflicting stories. One, on Steve Baker's website, it says that the PDD has expired and we've granted them 2 extensions. Really? No one talked to me about that, Steve. I don't think that's true. But then Judy Gracie's letter comes out and says that we've given them a demand letter and a deadline at 12/31, but we've gotten no explanation from our council
Bill.
as to the legal justification for that, why we're doing it that way.
Bill.
If it's expired, why
Bill.
are we?
Time.
Okay, can't do it justice in 1 minute.
Thank you.
If you'd like to
Steve?
talk to me, I'm happy to go into more detail with
Talk
you
to
all
him
later.
afterwards. Yep. Steve?
Yes, the PDD agreement has expired. We have given them 2 extensions, the most recent one going through December 31st. What we're giving them an extension of is that they owe us a $200,000 payment and they owe us 3 acres of land. And they have not been able to deliver on that. So we have involved our attorneys to help us with that. And if they don't follow through, then yes, this council, the next council, will have the opportunity to completely redo what the plan is for that 300 acres up there.
When did it
No,
expire?
please.
When did it expire, Steve?
Bill.
I'd like to know.
Follow up afterwards. Go ahead, Steve.
Does anybody want to know?
That's the accurate update.
Okay. Next question, Babs. And we are going to end this at 6 or 7, whatever. 6.
Hey guys, thanks. Y'all are all neighbors of mine, and I appreciate. I've been on council, I've been on PNC, and I want to thank you all for wanting to be on these boards and the work y'all have previously done. Now, I don't know if this is fair, but my 3 candidates, Sean, Chris, and Bill, I have specific questions for just them. Is that legal? Yes. Okay. So you guys are very cohesive. I've been talking to you for months and months and months. So I would like for you to disclose to everybody here what your initial plan is, because I know, and I think this is real important for us as the village. For the first time, we have a group running together instead of individual people, which I like that, because I think when y'all get into council that you will hit the ground running, because you have such a cohesive unity for what you want to do for the village. So either one of all of y'all represent what your plan would be as soon as you got into office, so people would know.
Okay, with that, start with Sean.
You know, prioritizing what we need and want to get done for the village with the input from the village, and not working on so many things, work within our constraints. In other words, work on the right things. And then in terms of when we've gotten to working on the right things, we've identified those. And I think we have a pretty good idea from a lot of the feedback, and most of those are in play. But is to then keep that line of communication open with the village. I think a concept of taking it through phases. There's a phase where you triage meaning you focus, you justify, or you backlog something, or you drop it because our constraints tell us we can't or shouldn't be doing it. You move it past there into a public comment phase. You get the input, and you might, at that point, need to adjust. Anyway, put structure in place.
Chris.
Yeah, so we do get along. We get along really well. We're good friends. Doesn't mean we always agree. My wife and I don't agree very much either, but we still get along quite well. 23 years. But the thing that we have the shared goals in terms of what we want to see, things like transparency, communications, all the great stuff like that. Where I'm looking at also, Sean and I both come out of very extensive technology backgrounds, and instead of going off and hiring new employees or doing a lot of busy work, if we can streamline a lot of using technology to streamline a lot of the ways that we interact with citizens and interact with people, I think that's one area I think we'll bring a lot to the table there. In terms of, I just think it's coming at it from a different viewpoint. We always, for 14 years, we've been beating our head against the wall trying to get different response, and we're coming in with a joint vision for where I think we're going to go, and that's how we move forward.
Thank you. Bill?
I'm with Sean. I would list priorities first, sit down and work out what is the most important issues. One of the things I would want to take a quick look at as soon as we take office is the budget, and run through and make sure there's consensus on how money is spent. Just because it's budgeted doesn't mean we need to do it. And then I would also float the list of priorities to the public and say, look, this is what we're planning on. Agreed? Understood? Any questions? But then I would like to get to work immediately on the building regs and get a lot of that cleared up quickly. There's a lot of pain people, our neighbors are feeling every day because of the building regs, and I want that cleaned up quickly. So yeah, that would be top priority for me. And then I think I just committed to another priority for Dan, and I really got to kind of work that one in.
Thank you guys, and best of luck.
Okay, thank you. This is going to be our last question because I
Can I
promised-
take just a real quick? I've had a lot of
I
water.
promised all of them that we would only go to six.
You'll answer faster.
Just
Please,
I can.
to put this together, we had to negotiate availability of all these people when we missed one.
Today is Maureen and mine's 18th anniversary of our first date.
Oh, really?
So we got a date night tonight.
I promised them all to make sure they were here, that we would end at 6. So I'm going to hold to that promise. Please, if you can, some of them will be staying. Bill's going. But please sit down with them and ask your questions here before they leave. So, last question.
I want to thank everybody for coming today. I know it's been hard trying to get everybody together with families and issues and everything. Thank you all for coming today. And of course, this year we got a lot of things coming up, as you've heard. We've got the PPD, we've got 2 lawsuits pending, and we've got the BCRUA. I could care less about Malberg Park. Obviously, I don't care about it. I think we should not be wasting money on that. I hope we stop it because I think there's other places that we can utilize this money with the lawsuits coming up and with the PPD. My concern that I'm having with the BCRUA is that all Cedar Park, Round Rock, and Leander are coming to pull water out of Lake Travis, and we get nothing but an albatross on the end of the lake that's going to be there, and we get no water. I know there's water, and I know there's grants available. I have asked the city council, I have asked Andy, I've asked them to look into the city or to the grants that are available. Leander, Cedar Park, and Round Rock have all got grant money to do this. Now, I don't know how much we've got, but I'm also working myself, and I'm going to bring this to the council. I'm working with the Texas Department of Agriculture and the Texas Water Department down there because they've just released about $6.5 million to help rural communities get water. And I know we can get it. If we can't get it through the BCRUA, we're going to get it somehow. It may be a very small, low-cost loan that we get, and it could be a grant. But I want water now. I don't want to wait 10 or 15 years. I want it now. I want everybody in the village to have it, and I don't want it to have to cost us a lot of money, and I know it's out there. So I want to know what you guys think about asking. I don't think we've been strong enough with the BCURA and say, look, you're going to build it in our backyard. I want in. I want my people that are going to be, all the people on that side of town are going to be hit with this, the drilling and all the stuff that's going on. I really need to have some more support. I think we need a stronger voice in the BCURA and bring us water. Everybody wants water in Volente. So I think we need to be strong, and I think you guys need to go after it. And I'm hoping that whoever's elected on there, I hope our three guys will make it a point of getting us some water.
So I'll start with Andy.
I've been attending the BCRUA meetings every quarter for the past 2 years, and and I also put an update out on Nextdoor regularly discussing it. One of the key things that's at the top of that update is that this is an informal meeting, and we have gotten into no formal agreements with them, because as soon as we start a formal agreement, that potentially can start the clock ticking. So we can't agree to anything. We can ask for things, but as soon as we say, oh, good, suddenly there's an issue there. But we recognize there's a bunch of things we need to ask for in return for the pain and suffering that we may be suffering while they do their project for many years. So we want stuff. Matter of fact, we want to get the best lawyer we can get that's familiar with this stuff, best engineer that we can get, and make them pay for it, and they've already agreed to do that, so we make sure we leave nothing on the table. Getting water from that water treatment plant, absolutely one of the things I would like to ask for. We probably want to put some other things on that list we want to ask for too.
Andy?
Some things we can throw away just in case for negotiating.
Steve?
Now, the mode we've been in for a while is just monitoring what they do, because they've always had this extremely long timeline for when they were actually going to be doing anything. They don't even have funding yet. But we just wanted to watch them to make sure that we knew the right time to jump in and get very active, which looks like now, because they have now applied with us twice for a permit to do some test wells. And we've denied those twice because we're in the process right now of trying to get some expert help in working out an interlocal agreement with them that will spell out all the things that protect Volente from their trucks driving up and down the streets, from them drilling wells, drilling down in ways that might hurt our wells, protecting water quality, all of the things that we might be worried about with this huge project that this huge entity with lots of money could do to Volente. And that's, of course, what we're looking for now is to get that attorney in place, which we already have a person, I wouldn't say selected yet, but identified by Kit, who's working with Andy and the group. And then once we have that person in place, we'll be beginning immediately with negotiations on them. And the plan is, of course, to have them pay for all of the expenses that we incur in trying to look over their shoulders and make sure they take care of us.
Thank you. Sean?
You know, I agree that we should exercise whatever leverage we can. I mean, it's kind of a big bully situation. If you look at it the way it's come into being, it's going to impact probably me the most directly, actually Chris and I the most directly out of people on here, Becky and other people I know. I don't know enough about, you sound like you're very knowledgeable about the water situation. I would love to see that kind of leverage, but I also think that there's other leverage that we need to apply in this situation. I mean, the major reason we became incorporated as a village is to deal with and protect against threats like these and manage them effectively, more effectively than we could otherwise. And so I agree with you.
I think that the agreement that we signed with them, the memorandum of understanding, was non-binding.
Sorry, I do apologize. I have to use the restroom really bad.
Memorandum of agreement was non-binding, sorry. And I attended those meetings along with Andy and recognized the need to get moving on the agreement last year at the end of my term, and approved an authorized budget to hire competent counsel to negotiate the agreement, with the understanding that BCRU would pay for it. I also have suggested and talked about economic environmental studies to justify the location that they've chosen and their rationale for even coming into our village. What are the alternatives they considered? You know, what else have they looked at, and, you know, why are they doing this? Does this just make economic sense for them? Is it more convenient for them to drive right through one of our neighborhoods? Another issue for me is that nobody has asked the citizens directly impacted by the pipeline. And I have talked to them. I've talked to a lot of them, and they're not happy. They're actually quite angry that the village has sold them out on this subject. I need more time again, sorry.
Yeah. I'll have to make an appointment with you.
Yeah,
With that, I really want to thank all of you for coming out today. This has been a great turnout. I'm very, very appreciative. And I want to thank all of the candidates. We wish them the best in the election. If you still have questions, grab a hold of them. Bill, I know, is going to leave for sure. Chris may be leaving, but if you want to talk to somebody, please make a point. Thank you. And Robert, thank you for all of this.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.